Series of author interviews is brought to you by Leisure Press and the Book Reality Experience, turning writers' dreams into book realities.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another Book Reality interview with authors. And this time we're joined by Rita McInnes, the author of the soon-to-be-released Australiana thriller, Wake the Dust. Hi Rita, how are you?
Hi Ian, good thanks.
Great stuff, thanks for joining us. Right, so for
Thank
everybody
you.
that doesn't know Rita McInnes, who are you? Where are you? Where are you from? Where are you talking to us today?
I'm in Ballarat at the moment. That's where I live and write. But I grew up in southwest New South Wales on the plains out there. So the bush has been my home, the back roads, I suppose you'd call it. And I've lived and worked in rural and remote Australia most of my life, and predominantly as a psychologist. And this is my book. This is my novel. It's not my first book. It's my first novel.
Oh, great. For those that don't know where Ballarat is, by the way, so it's in Australia, it's in Victoria, and the closest city to it would be Melbourne.
Melbourne. Yep. It's about an hour and 15 minutes from Melbourne. Yep.
Brilliant stuff. And you say that this isn't your first book. So what have you been up to? What have you been writing previously?
Previously, I published 10 years ago a book called iBrain Map, Freeing Your Brain for Happiness. And that's really about how our early life and difficult and overwhelming events are stuck in the body and how we keep repeating those patterns. It's based on trauma and all the research about the brain and how the body, brain, mind can get stuck in loops so that we're not able to free ourselves and just be present. The brain body keeps reverting to these old past experiences, and trauma is, we know more and more about trauma and how to work with it. And that was predominantly my work as a psychologist. And of course, my main character in Wake the Dust, Ella, does have quite a bit of trauma. So that comes out there too.
So I was going to say that Wake the Dust is not it's not the light-hearted, cozy mystery Australiana type of novel. It's quite deep and it's quite heavy, but it's superbly thrilling. It catches you from the first page. But a lot of that experience within the psychological trauma state has found its way into the book, hasn't it?
Yes, and people speak to me about the plot and say it's a strong plot. The people who've read it and the editors, it's a very strong plot, so it keeps people turning the page. But for me, I think the essence of the book is what's beneath the surface, that I'm much more interested in Ella as a character and then Tom's character, and more the invisible. And also one of the main themes throughout the novel is our relationship with the land and the continent of Australia and that powerful land and how brutal it can be. So there's a lot of the sense of brutality out there, of that experience of being on the back roads, and also that quiet beauty that gets under the skin. And when you've spent any time out there, or you walk the land out there, you walk on country, there's a feeling that the land seeps in, and it's like an unraveling of all those defenses we have, so that you strike a different place, a deeper place in yourself. That's been my experience. And it's something of that I'm trying to write to through the book too, as well as have a plot that keeps people turning the pages. So yes, I hope I've got the depth, and I hope there's more to it than a strong plot.
Yeah, well, certainly the landscape is almost a third character. And I noticed that picture behind you on the wall. That's very much my idea of some of the landscapes that Ella finds herself in through the book. And we should, by the way, for people that haven't had the chance to read it yet, because it's coming out on the
12th of
12th of
April.
April,
Yes, in Ballarat. Yeah.
and that'll be exciting. And you're going to have a book launch?
I am in Ballarat at the Ballarat Mechanics Institute. It's on my website, and there's flyers around the place. If you're in Ballarat, you're welcome to come along. But you'll be walking in Spain, I think, Ian. So
I will. I'll be off on my travels more, yeah, or I'll be lying somewhere with a dodgy knee. One of the two.
okay.
I was going to say that the landscape becomes a third character with Tom and Ella, but for those that haven't read it, give us a quick synopsis of the book.
Ella, who's a burnt-out nurse and a wannabe writer, basically wants to escape the city. She's had experiences of trauma, but it's more a feeling of the city and the world closing in on her. And yet all these questions about what's the meaning of life, how do I want to live my life, and not knowing what to do with all this and feeling kind of this feeling of wanting to escape. She lands a house-sitting job in a fictitious town called Broken Ridge. And from there, it's a deep dive into her psyche, all the challenges she has and the trouble she gets into, essentially. But through that, also this, I suppose, quite unraveling. I mean, she literally unravels too, and her mental health becomes quite problematic, and she's got a history of some mental health and certainly has the trauma. But there is this unraveling through, I think there's something about the space out there that it does, all our defenses can start to fall away and we start to ask different or deeper questions. So that's going on. And as you know, she goes missing pretty much halfway through the book. So we meet Ella, we get to know her really well, and then she disappears. And in the second half of the book, Tom, her neighbor, who is developing an intimate relationship with Ella through the first half of the book. He then goes searching for Ella, and the second half of the book is really his search for Ella, and then what happens and whether she lives or whether he finds her. All of those things are part of the drama that goes on in the book.
And what happens, happens. So let's talk about the other theme that runs through the book, which is poetry.
Yes.
Where did the fascination or the interest with poetry come from? And specifically, let's talk about the poets that you wanted definitely to have included in the book, but things changed in the writing of it.
Yes. So poetry, perhaps poetry, perhaps music, they could be either. It's just hard to put music into a book. But for me, I think, and I would say for many people, when we get to the edge of what we know and what we feel comfortable with our deepest emotions or our deepest uncertainties, like when we're in grief or when we're confused or when we're seeking meaning beyond the usual defenses and comforts we usually reach for, then words start to fail us. That's been my experience, and yet I'm a writer. But in that space, I find the great poets can often speak into that space. And I think what's very particular about poetry, they don't tell us to fix it or to leave it or to ignore it, but it's like they open up that space as a mystery, as a beholding. So we get to behold our own experience, but we're not so alone because it's shared with the poet and the poetry or the music. And I think poetry and music in particular afford people that space of opening into something that is hard to name and hard to speak to. In the book, Ella is actually at a house where she is able to access Hans's library. So a lot of the poets and a lot of the literature she's reading is some of the classics, and all the things that I think all of us have said, I want to read that one day, like Proust, like Balzac. I mean, some of those didn't make it, but Proust certainly got into the book, and Hermann Hesse, some really beautiful of the old men of literature, I suppose. And I had hoped to use some more Australian poetry, and had written a cento to honour a well-known Australian poet. But as you know, getting copyright for that became very difficult and was problematic. So we went to plan B, and plan B was that I would write the call and response that Ella calls out when she's in this cave, believing she's facing her death alone, which I think is terrifying for all of us to contemplate facing our death alone, not just to contemplate death, but to contemplate facing death alone. What do we call out for or to? We call out to the poet. Who else can answer us? And she's got a habit, which is my habit and has been for many, many years, of writing down great lines of poetry and great quotes. And they're in the back of her journal, which she has with her in the cave. So she calls out to the poet and says, how do I face this thing called death? Help me, poet, help me manage this. And I had intended to use who I would consider a great Australian poet. But just in case, we went to plan B, and I started to write my own poetry to respond to Ella's questions and to Ella's calling out. And she's also calling out to Tom in some ways through time and space, because Tom's actually seeking for her in this mine shaft where she is. And so she's calling out to the dead poet, and she's calling out to Tom as well. And it's this call and response. And out of that, as you know, this fictitious poet arrived called Olivia Parsons, and she became a fully fledged being in my creative life, and she hasn't gone away. And there is a book coming, and I haven't spoken to you for a while, Ian, but I tell you, she has taken over my life completely. I pretty much am writing her every day. So yes, there's the poetry that Olivia has in the novel, but now, and of course we reference that book, which I'm yet to write, but it is a reference in the novel, and there's a page on my website, which has all just been great fun. And she is really revealing herself to me and her interests. And of course, she was writing in the early 20th century. So she's talking about her life as a woman on the land as a country woman. But I mean, she's a very well-educated young woman. But, you know, talking about when her betrothed goes off to war. And she's had one secret night with him, what she calls a love night, which, of course, is Rumi's term for it. So, you know, I'm investigating intimacy and the desire for intimacy, and she's really investigating these things. So I'm having a ball. So, yes, that's taking all my attention. So it's hard to pull myself up and go, this is the novel that you're about to launch. So, yes, that's the long answer. Ian, well, I'm loving it.
I love the fact that, so you said there about it's difficult to put music in a book, obviously, mainly due to one thing, which is the copyright issues for putting lyrics into books. It's fraught with difficulty. It's fraught with danger if you don't seek the right permissions. You know, you stick a line of a Bob Dylan song into your book and then realize that it's copyright all over the world for X amount of years. And you end up getting sued quite heavily, or could do, if the publishing company decide to go after you. And what people don't realize is that that's the same with modern day poets. It's fine to quote from Proust because that's way outside of copyright. It's fine to quote from Dickens. Usually it's way outside of copyright, etc. But with the Australian author that you wanted to use, the poet, we actually applied for permission 7 months ago.
Yeah, would be
months
that
ago, give or take. We got a reply back, which basically said, we've received your letter, we'll have a think about it. But that was about 3 months into the process, and we still haven't heard back from them. So that idea of you inventing Olivia was born out of necessity. But I love the fact that Olivia was born, and she's got a backstory, and she's now got a life, and she's now got a web page, and she's now going to have a book written about her, and she's basically invented herself. I know she's in your head, but is she? Or is she someone that was hanging around your Ballarat house because there was a spirit lingering there of dead poets? I just love Olivia, and I cannot wait to read the next book all about her.
Great. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, she's so much fun. and she's really smart, and she is pushing me to understand things that I've kind of gone, oh yeah, that's what that is. But no, she really gets in there. She wants to know, she wants to investigate. And it's all about direct experience, and then her investigations then of, you know, some of the philosophers. And yeah, no, it's fun. It's great fun.
Great stuff. So let's take you back to Rita when Rita was a little girl. Did Rita always want to be a psychologist, or did she want to be a writer, or did she want to be a downhill slalom skier? What was Rita's goal in life when she was little?
I think I don't know that I had one, Ian. I think you know, what I used to do when I found life difficult, which I tended to find it all really hard and confusing. I would run away and I'd walk around the farm. I grew up on a farm. So it felt like the only option I had. You couldn't go into town. I couldn't talk to friends. You know, so if I was having a fight with my sister, which was very regular, I would disappear. I would run down the farm and I would walk for hours, and nobody bothered me really. I always thought someone would come and find me, but nobody knew I was missing. Whereas I might have run away going, oh, it's not fair. It was often in my head drama. But the thing that happened, I mean, there was the land, the great gift of the land. I mean, it's fairly wild country where I grew up. It was flat. You walked forever, big sky, big horizons, big, everything was big. It was hot. It was cold. And it kind of held me, I think, that, you know, I'd go off in a tantrum, and then walking and walking and walking, I would slowly melt into the landscape. But the other thing that happened that I feel very grateful for, and mostly it caused me a lot of trouble at school and through my life, because I couldn't concentrate because I lived in my imagination. My imagination was just alive a lot of the time. And I think for kids, truly, for little kids, I think our imagination, when it's allowed to roam the land, we know that the land's alive. I mean, you have a sense that crow over there is a personality, is a character. And that big tree there, I mean, it looks like a gnome or something like that. It really does. And you can kind of have a sense that it would have a deep, scratchy voice or something like that. So for me, the richness of imagination, you know, unified with the land, and this little, you know, frustrated little girl wandering down the paddock going, I don't understand people, you know, then that was my happy place. Walking in the bush is still my happy place. I became a psychologist kind of by default. When I finally went to uni after several failed attempts and a lot of traveling, I went back in my late 20s and I did literature and English literature and psychology as a BA. And when I got to the end, I went, I don't want to teach English. I didn't know what other options there were with literature. I didn't believe I was a writer, even though I didn't have the confidence really or the belief in myself at that time in my life. Even though I always wrote, I've always kept journals, I've always written poetry for as long as I can remember. So I followed this other path and sort of gradually became a psychologist. And of course, I love the human psyche. That's full of the imagination as well. So, and, you know, I think in my first book, those two things came together, and my fascination with the psyche and the brain and trauma, my own trauma and other people's trauma. And that was the beginning of putting it into the world more than it wasn't that I will always write, but putting it into the world and making it into, I guess, a product or something other people will read. Yes, that is another phase which seems to be continuing.
Brilliant. When you say there about writing, so do you have a place for writing? Do you have a time for writing? Is it quick jotted down notes in notebooks, or are you methodical and you plan everything out? How does your process work?
My process. So every morning I write in bed. So when I wake up, have cups of tea and I go back to bed and I sit up and I write. And it's not even so much about the writing, I don't think, Ian. I think it's about that I give myself that space. And it's a bit like opening to the creative process. And so if I'm not writing anything, I just write. I don't think, I think I'm more a writer than I am an author, where people set out to write a book or a novel. I just write. For me, it's part of my relationship with myself, my deepening relationship with myself, that what's going on here. I mean, it's, people talk about morning pages, I suppose. It's something, from the artist's way. Some people would know about that. So in some ways, it's not dissimilar to that, but it's more about giving myself space to see what wants to emerge out of my psyche, out of my creative space, what I call the creative mystery, actually. And the other thing I'd say, though, is, having Olivia on the page, and this is what happened with Dust to some degree. Now that Olivia's there, she has a journal. So often I'll be writing other stuff and I'll go, this is Olivia. And I have to go and get her journal. I mean, she's got a file, of course, on my computer, but she actually has a journal, which isn't here, it's in the room. And the other morning, she was talking. I'm going, oh my God, this is Olivia. I can hear her voice. It's different. She has certain topics. She has ways of speaking, and it's material for the Olivia book. So, and maybe this does sound crazy, but I'm walking around the house going, Olivia, Olivia, because I couldn't find where I'd left the journal. So I think, there's that phase. And then, of course, as you know, working with your process, with the publishing process, then when it gets to the pointy end, then, of course, I start really having to hone that, working with editors, and that's a whole different process. But I would say that's not my forte. I love the creative, what's going on, what can happen, the mess of it all. I kind of love the mess of it all, but it means there's a lot more work to do at the pointy end, I have to say.
Because it's cloud-like and we have to get it into some form of shape. It's interesting that you say it sounds crazy. It does to anybody that's not a writer. If you talk to writers and go, my character talks to me, or my character decided to do this, and everybody else looks at you and thinks, okay, you're nuts. But it's kind of like our writer's internet history. Don't judge us. It's fine. We've got particular lookup things that it's perfectly valid for us to be Googling about how deep would a knife cut the wrist if you decided to hack your own hand off, type of thing, which people that aren't writers think are weird. So with the book, you're going to have the book launch. What's been the most interesting thing that you've learnt about the whole process? And why did you decide to go independent? So I'm not talking about the writing process now, the actual, what you say, the pointy end. What's been the most interesting thing about the process that you've learned, and why choose to go as an independent author?
I think the thing for me that I keep learning about editing and the editing process, apart from that it's like having skin stripped off, skin stripped off the ego. It's very particular. You've got your baby and you think you've done a great job, and skin stripped off. I think one of the things I've learned, and I have to relearn every time it happens, is that I take what other people say about my writing and I trust the editors to point to something that they know they can see in a way that I can't see it. But this happened with my first book, and it's happened again now, that I think some editors want to tell me what to do, which of course isn't always that helpful. Some will point to it, and then I come up with what to do. But whatever they do, I think it's about accepting. It's a bit like I'm the parent. So even if I get great advice and all these things, in some ways I take what's given to me and what people say about my book, good, bad, or otherwise. And I then try to, it's a kind of empathy through the eyes of the editor. Think about, what are they actually saying to me that they are seeing or hearing or noticing that I can't see? You would think that's obvious, but it's not always, because sometimes they tell me what I should do. But and you know, that's what editors do often. But sometimes I have to look through everything, look through the way they're saying, to go, well, what's going on here? And then how do I come back to stay true to what is true for my character, true for my novel? Because the characters speak to me, but so does the novel. It's a bit like being in a complex system. I don't decide what happens next. I don't feel like I do. I have to stay. It's like holding all these parts and then seeing what emerges out of that. In terms of going independent, I I started doing some of the checking it out. I should, you know, and to be honest, Ian, it felt a bit like selling my soul, that I had to jump through hoops and I had to try and go to interviews. I had to put it down into little, this is with standard publishers. I felt like I was trying to pitch a sort of narrowed, marketable version of what my novel was, instead of actually holding the richness and all the work that I'd put in and all the depth that I was trying to create, and find somebody who actually understood that about what I was doing. That it's not a plot driven novel. It has depth, and it's not it's not that easy a read. There's some really difficult things in there. And I keep turning towards them. And so I just found it was a bit like selling my soul to try and, it was like I was contorting myself and my novel to try and fit in with, that mainstream publishing process. And this has been fantastic, I have to say. And you won't be there when I thank you. You'll be walking the Camino. But so I do want to thank you. I feel like you really have held that space, and the truth and the authenticity of my work and what I'm trying to do with the team at Book Reality, and all the editors and the designers. I feel like I've been really held, and it's held the truth of what I'm trying to do, even when I don't know what I'm trying to do, which is sometimes how it's been for me. So that's how it's been.
Oh, well,
So thank you.
Well, it's our pleasure to be able to help. And yes, we're in that fantastic position with independent authors that you don't have to contort to fit the mainstream mold or whatever's on trend or whatever the marketability for this month or next month is. So it's also helpful that we've got people like Brittany Wilson, who takes an idea for a cover and comes back with a superb rendition and a few examples, and you choose one, and then she hones in exactly what you want, down to, that's not quite the right color of red, that's not the landscape color, and we end up with a product that looks superb.
It
And
does.
I think rivals anything that a traditional publisher could put together on their covers. So that's a big shout out and a thank you to Brittany as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people I've sent some books to thank them, the readers and editors, have said the first thing they say is, what a great cover. It looks fantastic. The colors are great. So yeah, shout out to Brittany for sure.
Well done, her. Right, so thanks very much for all of this. And we've covered quite a lot there, but what we're going to end up with is a series of quickfire questions, which are very loosely based on the Actors Studios quickfire questions at the end of those, if you remember that. I'm just going to look this way and pull them up on screen so that I've got them. And then it's going to be over to you. And I do mention that it's meant to be quickfire.
Yes.
Only because when I got asked these first time round, I went off on a tangent. So here we go. Right. Rita McInnes, author of Wake the Dust. What is your favourite book?
I think The Little Prince by Exupéry. The Little Prince. I can never say his name though, but the French. I probably read that more often than any other book. It's just a delight. It's truly a delight.
Excellent. And if you've got one, what is your least favourite book?
I don't think I have one. I just avoid them. If I pick it up and nothing happens, I put it down. So probably
So
anything in the mainstream, any mainstream, when it's been marketed and targeted, I probably don't go there most of the time.
fair enough. In life in general, what makes you happy? What turns you on?
Writing, showing up to write, walking in the bush alone. Actually, I love walking in the bush, like proper bush on my own, where I can hear birds and trees, and I can hear trees, yes, and breeze, and it speaks to me. That is my happy place, truly.
Very
Yeah.
good. And conversely, what turns you off?
Crowds, too many people.
Okay. Difficult one, I think, for you at this point. Summer or winter?
Winter, probably, in my little house with my wood fire. Yes, that's a great place to write, I have to say.
Okay. And I think you might probably have answered this, but on a completely free day to do anything you want, who would you spend it with?
Probably myself and my imagination. And Olivia would probably come for a walk with me. But oh, look, I've got some beautiful friends and people in my life. But I do love to go off on my own and just have a quiet experience. Engagement with the bush, intimacy with the land, I think is a gift.
Very
Yeah.
good. And that leads us to what type of land? Mountains or oceans?
Or something in between. Although I love the mountains, if I feel congested or discombobulated, the thing that I love to do is have a road trip where I can see right to the horizon. So I love the spaces, and I think it's, there's something about the Australian landscape that is so unique and beyond words at times. And I think that poetry does come out of that land for sure. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. And what is your favorite movie?
Uh, I don't know. Can I say I don't know? Or we're not
Yeah.
allowed to do that.
No, you're
I don't tend to watch movies much anymore, or even I don't really watch TV or movies like the rest of the world, I think. I prefer to read a book these days. So
what was the first movie that popped into your head when I said movie?
they're probably kids' movies, because I love kids' movies and I love children's literature. And I things like Harry Potter and magic. I still love all that stuff. I love fantasy, and I love, that's all those things. And then I feel a bit embarrassed that I go, oh, I still just like kids stuff, because it's pure imagination.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with kids' movies. Up is still the best opening to any movie I've watched ever. And
What
there's
is that one? Sorry.
Up, Up
Up.
by the Pixar movie Up. And the first 15 minutes of Up is the greatest love story on film without a single word being spoke. It's super.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, so what song to listen to for the rest of your life if you've only got one choice?
It's a funny one. I think it's Leonard Cohen, Dance Me to the End of Love.
Very good. That's
Yeah.
a different one because most people would say Leonard Cohen, Hallelujah. But
No, and it's something about, and of course, Olivia's writing about love at the moment, and she's saying, I'm not sure I believe in love, but she certainly believes in intimacy. And I think we do confuse this word love, but I think, it always draws us, doesn't it? But there's something about Leonard Cohen. It's the poetry in that, and him, inviting something in that song as a doorway into some greater part of ourselves. I think that's what I find beautiful about Leonard Cohen's music and poetry. He's a poet. He was a poet, of course. So, yeah.
good stuff. And who makes you laugh the most?
Uh, oh God. Other than friends, like, is this somebody who everybody has to know?
No.
Uh,
Friends, partners, family. It can be
yeah.
anything. Who makes you laugh the most?
You know, I think it's not a person that makes me laugh. I think it's the state that I'm in. If I'm in a joyful state, I will laugh at the crow. Like yesterday, I swear, the crow. There's a bossy crow here. That if I don't put water in the water fountain, other people have little water bird baths where they have pretty little birds. I have crows and blackbirds. I swear. And comes, he sits in the tree across the road, and if I haven't filled it up or changed the water, he gets very grumpy. And yesterday morning, he was sitting on a post just outside my window, and he'd brought a donut, I'm sure. And I thought I'd see it in the bird bath because often he soaks bread there so he can then eat it. But it disappeared. I can't find the donut. And I thought, did he bring me a donut? Because often you see those videos where, you know, crows in particular, or magpies sometimes bring food for the person who looks after them. I don't think mine's that kind of crow. But, you know, so I think it's my state that allows me to laugh. And so it's sometimes people, but more it's a state of joy, and birds and funny things just appear, and it's being open to that, I think, joyfulness and laughing. So I was just laughing about this funny crow that was sitting there with his donut, and I'm going, is that a donut? I don't know, and I haven't told anybody, so it was probably not a good idea to tell it on, on a recording. But it was funny, and it still makes me laugh seeing this crow and my whole relationship with this crow, and giving him his water bath and making sure he has fresh water every day. That makes me laugh.
And does this crow have a name?
Not yet, not yet. I'm probably grumpy if I call him anything. I think he's just grumpy. If I've been away for a few days, I come back and he's at me because there's no water in the water bath, and the little pool around it. So
brilliant. We used to have a magpie that walked around like an English private school tutor back in the day. You could imagine with a flat board and a cape, but with his wings tucked behind his back like arms, and he would strut around. We called him Magnus. He was great.
I can see it. Yes, I can see it in my imagination.
We liked Magnus a lot. Right. Gorgeous. What smell do you love?
I do love jasmine because I think it's a summer thing, really. Yeah, I love jasmine.
And what smell do you hate?
Rotten meat.
Unlike your crow friend, who would love it. Other than a writer and a psychologist, obviously, what profession would you like to do or to have been?
Probably a traveller. Is that an option?
Yeah, that works. And what profession would you not like to do?
Anything in an office.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you turn up at the pearly gates?
Come in, and you've got all the time and all the resources you need to create anything you want.
Brilliant stuff. Rita, it's been a joy and a pleasure. Thank you very much. Good luck for the 12th of April. And where is it again in Ballarat?
It's in Ballarat at the Ballarat Mechanics Institute upstairs in a beautiful room overlooking Sturt Street, the main street.
And if people do, they have to register for tickets, or do they just come along?
Yeah, they're suggesting registering for tickets. It's free, but it just helps us with catering. So, but if they're in town, they can come along. It's at 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Well, I hope that you have a fantastic launch day. I know that you've got lots of books ordered, so that you're going to have lots there for people to buy, and you can sign them off for them. Thanks again, Rita, and here's to Olivia's new book.
Yes, thanks, Ian.
Cheers.
Hi, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more readings and author interviews. And don't forget to hit that button to be notified every time we post new content.
If you're an independent author and you'd like to be a guest on our podcast and YouTube channels, simply email guest@bookreality.com or visit our website at bookreality.com and have a look at our podcast page.